welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, and the premier wrestling photographer, Mike Lano, and former and maybe still indie wrestling manager, Nikita Breznikov. So it's great
He's not done.
You never retired till you're dead, right? In wrestling. And so yes, we do have some big stories to talk about tonight.
Let me say this first because you hit it right on the nose. Until you're dead. I just watched the East Coast feed of the Tony Bennett, the very last concert that he'll ever do in front of people with Lady Gaga on CBS, and it was outstanding. But a very couple of things is the very last song he sang. There's been this ongoing friendly battle between San Francisco, which is like a little New York, and New York over who takes credit for Tony Bennett. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was born and raised in New York, but
San Francisco is a smarter version of New York.
Yeah, all right. But he came to fame, amongst his zillion hits in his career since the early 50s with I Left My Heart in San Francisco, which is the very last song he sang on this special in New York at the wonderful Radio City Music Hall. I'm sure Nikita's been there. I took a tour of it. It's been beautiful, historic, like everything in New York. But what got to me was, and Russ, buddy, will appreciate this, at the 2010, the first of the modern day San Francisco Giants World Series victories, it was 2012 and then 2014, but the first one, the 2010, and I worked as press for the San Francisco Chronicle and Examiner for all three of them, and I was on one of the floats in the last one. But anyway, at the first one, when the City Hall thing with all the dignitaries, and then Governor Schwarzenegger, who got booed, as Russ and I have talked, Tony Bennett came out at the very end of the thing at City Hall in front of everyone. And I was there in the press box. I was 2 feet, dead center, right in front of Tony Bennett when he sang that song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. If you look at the footage, it's up on, it's all over the internet and stuff, of that first San Francisco Giants victory parade. And him singing a cappella, 2 feet in front of me. There was nobody in between us. I was, like inches. And I snapped a ton of shots that were in both of those newspapers, and then Associated Press sent around. But I got very emotional watching that, because if you know the backstory, this thing was filmed a few months ago, and Tony Bennett was like curled up in a little ball looking at the floor. His Alzheimer's is really very bad, according to his family and Gaga, who was there. And the minute they brought him on stage and he heard the music, he has this in his DNA, like wrestlers do and other artists, and came to life. And so whereas he, didn't know what time of day it was, couldn't remember his name, any of those things, or who she is, he got into the mode. It's just in his DNA, and he could sing and relate to the audience. It brought him back to life. And he didn't even remember her name at all until...
Well, that's what I've heard about Ric Flair, is that you can go up to Ric Flair while he's fast asleep and go 1, 2, and his shoulder will pop up. Just he's that it's part of who he is, And
it's the amazing thing about human beings, whether you're a wrestler, and there have been many wrestlers who could do this thing in their sleep, or they come alive, they forget the pain. We've heard that story. I'm sure Nikita's heard the story many times, maybe from our beloved Nikolai Volkov and Bruno and some of the rest. They can be all this horrific pain, barely move, but when they feel that adrenaline rush from the audience, etc. So I wanted to bring up two things. So 2 top stories. Russ wants to add the fan attacking Seth Rollins at whatever show it was, Raw on Monday night. Whether it's legit or not, because it looked weird. Like, what fans are allowed backstage? It looked like the guy tackled him coming from backstage area. So I don't know if that's a work. The second big story, which can lead us into some talk about these things in wrestling's past, was that everybody's talking as a positive thing. They're saying it's the greatest interview tete-a-tete they've ever seen in like 40 years on AEW Friday Night Rampage show on TNT, where CM Punk finally had the verbal face-off, and it went well over, like 24, 25 minutes to start the show. But it wasn't a boring WWE thing of promos. It was squaring off against MJF, Michael James Friedman, that heel, fantastic character who first got notice internationally from Court Bauer's MLW U.S. promotion. So CM Punk jawing it off with MJF, and MJF making fun of him and actually, saying, comparing him or saying stuff like, "Oh, you were with the can't see me guy," meaning Cena, and then CM Punk retorted something to the effect that it was just amazing, and they made references to the Undertaker and Triple H while they're in the competing promotion. So I want to throw out to you guys and ask you. Let's first tackle Russ's topic of like fan riots or fans attacking wrestlers. So to both of you guys, Nikita first.
Yeah, did any fans ever attack you, and how'd you handle it?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Famous story is a Green Beret. We were doing a small spot show up in Pennsylvania, a college town up in Pennsylvania. And I'm doing my thing at ringside, and this guy's giving me the, MF, I'm going to wait for you. And I'm a Green Beret, and I'm like, yeah, your mother said she was happy last night. Beat it, I'm thinking everything is okay. So we're getting ready to go to the parking lot. I said, Nikolai, oh, shit, there's that Green Beret, and he's waiting, right? He's like, and he's giving me, like, come on over here. And I'm like, oh, boy. So I figure, all right, I'll handle this. So I go over. Of course, I got no accent. I've got nothing. I pull out my badge and say, brother, hang on. I'm one of you. And he's like, what the hell? I said, it's all entertainment. That's it. I said, I'm just there doing my job, this job tonight. And I did it well, didn't I? He's like, I wanted to kill you. I was really going to beat the hell out of you. I was like, well, that's cool, man. Thank you. But from the fans' perspective, man, how many did I see over the years? Unbelievable. In fact, what a wild coincidence. Tonight is the very first show I ever attended. I was like 15 years old. Pedro's last successful title defense in Baltimore. He beat Tanaka, who had won a battle royal. Tanaka walks out of the ring, and this pretty good sized guy walks up and nails him. And Tanaka just looks at him and he gives him a chop, and I swear that guy went 4 rows and sailing off like a kite. And it's like, what a mental case. So many of them over the years. People love it. They loved it then, and it's like they couldn't hold back.
Nikita, can you tell us the rest of the card? So it was Morales defending last time that you would see him at was it the Cap Center?
No, the Civic Center in Baltimore, but that was his last title defense at all. Because that was a Wednesday. Yeah, that was a Wednesday night. And then he didn't do anything else till that Saturday, which was December the 1st. And there he is with Stasiak. But it was a battle royal. And it was the first time we saw the Giant. And it's funny, the story, because first time I had ever been, but my friend's father took us because back then Baltimore, in that section, it looked like a movie, like the docks or something. You wouldn't let a kid go down there by himself. So my friend's father took us, and he hated battle royals. He didn't want to. So my friend tells me, don't tell my father it's a battle royal. So it's like, okay. So he's like, well, who's going to be there, guys? And we're telling him, and it's Chief. And Andre, he's like, oh, wow. Andre's first appearance in Baltimore. And then the first match is on, and here they come, all marching towards the ring. He's like, what the hell? And it's like, he didn't care. As soon as he saw Andre towering over everybody, he was lost. It was just great. Andre against Fuji was one of the prelims, and I'll never forget it.
Wow. That's quite a card. I'm sure some of our faves, Baron Mikelski, Kluna, he must have been on it. But Andre then was at his peak because within a couple of years he became less mobile to me, having seen him in Montreal in '72 as Jean Ferret before Vince Sr. signed him and then started booking him, everywhere. The touring attraction. You remember the touring attractions were cool because wrestling had quite a few of them. Well before Gorgeous George, there were, the midgets and the women that would tour around. They would never stay in any one place. Then there was Happy Humphrey, who was like 600-pound guy. And then Haystack Calhoun was the next touring guy, with Gorgeous George sort of in between there, going from place to place. And Haystack Calhoun, I mean, he wasn't just, docked at the Tri-WF of Vince Sr. He was going everywhere, coming to LA and San Francisco. Remember Battle Royal with Man Mountain Mike, Haystack Calhoun, and the McCreary twins, who were in the Guinness Book of World Records. So you had.
I was just about to bring up the twins. You caught me just before I was able to bring them up.
They had to enforce the ring. They had to.
They did. The wood underneath the mat. But it's such a fondness for me to remember different body types and guys who had different characteristics. It wasn't so much homogenized like what you see today. Even with the beloved high spot style, everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing super kicks and all of that. But then everybody was so unique, and they didn't have to be characters like the 80s WWF junk. Widowmakers and all of that foolishness for the kids. But this was something that appealed to, adults. And even Dick Murdoch or the Blackjacks, say, Lanza and Mulligan, it wasn't much of a gimmick, but they made them unique. And they were still like relatable. And the big guys, and Andre and Ernie Ladd, who was a giant even before that. And then when you get the Andre Ernie Ladd, giant.
Today is Ernie Ladd's 85th birthday, if he'd been around.
Yes.
I can't tell. And I was one of the last people in wrestling to see him. His last public event, he came to a Cauliflower Alley in Vegas, and I had shot him in Los Angeles and New York and San Francisco and, Florida, Georgia, a lot of places, and got to ride with he and his wife back to the airport. And he was a genius. He had learned from Thez, but he also finessed when he was booking and helping book with Bill Watts, and got a lot of respect from the talent there. He kind of helped create the whole Junkyard Dog thing out of Sylvester Ritter coming from Stu Hart's Calgary into Mid-South for Watts. And Ernie Ladd was just such an amazing. Do you remember, Nikita? You have to remember what an amazing heel and talker he was. He was great on all levels. I mean, he
even body slammed Andre the Giant. He had tremendous strength. It wasn't just all talk. At 6'9" and a former football player, he could deliver.
And one of the few to wrestle all three of the top champions: Morales, Bruno, and Backlund. He wrestled all three.
And he wrestled Funks, Harley, pretty much everybody in the NWA, and had Japan tours. But Los Angeles so fondly, he had, when he first came in, because he'd actually been in LA as a face in the 60s, even teamed with Thez, had a match with Thez, as he did in other territories. But when he came in 72, it was like June of 72, defeating John Tolos, who was then babyface. I mean, really the top babyface, just underneath Fred Blassie is our top babyface. And he defeats Tolos, and he's doing the thumb to the throat, and Tolos is selling it, spitting up blood, in order to go back to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to take care of his sister, who had MS, like my mom, in a wheelchair, and visit with his brother Chris. And then he would return back to help Victor Rivera. About 6 months later, he came to the mask, sitting front row. He interferes, costs Ladd the match and the title to Rivera. And the following show at the Olympic Auditorium in LA 2 weeks later, he loaded up with a long chain, and he put it under his knee pad, or his knee pad over it. And then Tolos did his famous knee drops off the top rope with the chain under that. And then Ladd was spitting up blood. And
by the way, wouldn't that hurt your knee just like crazy if you really did do that? That would just be now that we're older and we realize, how tough it is on your knees to, just even do it. To me, right now, the idea of doing an elbow drop would be I think I would break every bone in my body.
Well, Ernie Ladd did the leg drop before Hulk Hogan. That was his
right.
favorite.
Do you remember the promos, though? If you watch on YouTube, you'll hear him. And I can't do a good Ernie Ladd impression, but he's being interviewed by Gene LaBelle, and Gene LaBelle just accidentally touches him with a mic or something. He goes, "You're not a doctor or a nurse. You can't touch me," and blah, blah, blah. And then when he was in the IWA, and I was, shooting that, and the TV and the Roosevelt Stadium outdoor shows in New Jersey, and the promos for that, and turning on Thunderbolt Patterson. but he, depending on the territory, he often would use the tagline when he first got to the territory. And he would always wrestle in street clothes and come in and destroy somebody, like a jobber, whether it was a young Terry Gordy billed as Terry Mecca in the IWA, the Eddie Einhorn group that was taking on Vince Sr.'s Tri-WF and the MWA as Sam Munchnick all at once. Long story, maybe for another show. But he would destroy somebody in the street clothes, and then he'd get on the mic and he'd say, you missed the most important event of your life, your birth. Don't miss the second most important one when I take it.
Evan uses that line every so
Birth
often.
of your mother and father, yes.
Would you say that Ernie Ladd was the first black wrestler to really use heel heat to his advantage in the South? Because I think that to a lot of black, and I'm not trying to say that they were not courageous enough just to get in the ring, but I think a lot of black wrestlers were afraid to trigger that heel heat when they worked the South, because people would start showing up with pitchforks and their Ku Klux Klan hoods and all that stuff.
Oh, when he had the feud with Dusty Rhodes in Florida as a heel, I mean, the crowds went nuts. But
he didn't mind playing that card. I think before that,
he was a legit 6'9" before arthritis shrunk him. You know, when I saw him at the end, and I posed him with everybody that I could: Terry Funk, Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe, Buddy Colt, Tolis, Neil Mascaras, you know, on and on, all of these guys that he'd faced. It was, you know, very emotional for me. And then riding in the car and talking to this guy is such a brains, one of the greatest heels, you know, just.
Yeah, but do you think that he broke ground as a heel character, especially being able to bring it in at a time when racial tensions were as high as they were?
Let's go to Nikita on that.
No, I don't think that mattered. They were worried about making the money, and that you did what you had to do. Like anybody, any kind of heel gimmick, what I just explained, you did it. You went out and did your job. Ernie Ladd, and I want to say this, Dr. Mike, were you at the first Hall of Fame ceremony? Did you shoot anything there?
No,
it was in Baltimore.
Yeah, not at the WWF's one. Was he inducted at that first one with Andre?
No, Bobo was, and he inducted Bobo.
Wow.
And it was the best Hall of Fame speech I've ever heard. It was, if you ever have a chance to go back and listen, it is excellent. And he's the first picture I ever got with anybody, because he was in the lobby, and the first things out of his mouth were, anybody seen Bobo? And it's like, that's great. You know, they had the feuds over the years, but they loved each other. And there you go. You're talking black on black. I mean, a lot of promoters didn't want to touch that, because that was kind of like maybe taboo.
That was in some territories, not where you were in the Northeast, which was more progressive, but in many territories in the 60s and even through 73 or so, they would just pair the black guys against each other. Like in LA, the first title defense of Ernie Ladd was against Bobo. And I shot that. It was an incredible match. You know, Bobo still could move.
But I'm trying to think back as to who the first major black heel was. And I'm thinking Ernie Ladd might be. I mean, I'm sure there were other.
Norval Austin, there was quite a few. Armand Hussein turned from face to heel in Los Angeles around 67. So it was before Ernie. But Ernie was the greatest. And I'm saying I'm putting him right behind on the greatest classic wrestler TV era heels, behind Sheik and Killer Kowalski. He is right up there for the stuff I saw him do against Pedro in particular. He was fantastic. Tell us about some of that, Nikita, the stuff and the interviews and just the matches with Pedro. But I think he probably also faced Manny Soto and Victor Rivera Monsoon, of course.
Sure. The thing that made Ernie Ladd, he was believable as well. Of course, he had the knowledge. He was an athlete. But you looked at this true giant at that time, and he's believable as a killer. He could just walk over all, like he would beat DiNucci when he was on his way to wrestle Bruno in 76, put Dominic away record time, and then he goes on to meet Bruno. He, of course, they always had the tape thumb, and the Wizard managed him all the way through. The run with Pedro in 72, then 76 against Bruno, and then against Backlund in 78. The Wizard was by his side. funny, the little wizard there with the big Ernie Ladd, but they got along great, and they were a perfect pairing. But with
I always admired the wizard. I always admired the wizard. He was always a major role model of mine.
Ernie Ladd could work with the big guys. Of course, he and Andre were just natural. Or Monsoon. I think Ladd and Monsoon were great matches. They really, because even Monsoon, he could do the leapfrog. He wasn't going to drop kick like Crusher Blackwell, but for a big man of 400 pounds, hey, he gets in there. He's mobile. He's not going to be very mobile, but he does it on his own. And again, Calhoun, what you were just talking about. Here's a friggin' guy, he's 600 pounds or close to it, whatever. He's there, he's walking, he's talking. Nobody's driving him in any kind of like vehicle to get him to and from the ring. He's walking in under his own power, does his thing 5-10 minutes, and then he's gone. It's like, that's incredible. You don't find that all the time. But there you go. And I know Ernie Ladd had a lot of trouble with his knees because of football.
Yeah, the football and his weight and stuff later on. He, towards the end of his in-ring career, at least, he managed guys like Afa and Sika for Bill Watts. And those are the original Wild Samoans that are part of the whole current WWE bloodline thing. And he managed also a bit in Atlanta, and as did Bearcat Wright. But I saw Ernie. Ernie could, as you correctly said, he could work with anybody, whether a Jack Briscoe or a Sheik in Detroit, which was huge, or a T-Bolt Patterson. And that can get us into our next topic of two guys on either side of the ring with a mic, but at the top of their game as stick men. Great promos, 5-star promos, of which Ernie Ladd was. But when he first came into LA as the heel in I guess March of '72, he was faced with one of those pioneers. I always say the TV era pioneers, after some of the great original 40s black wrestlers, but the African Americans in the mid 50s on, Bobo, Art Thomas, Bearcat Wright, Sweet Daddy Siki, and Dory Dixon. So Ernie Ladd comes in to a guy he had nothing but respect for. This guy was huge in Japan, his home country of Mexico, even though he's Jamaican, and he wrestled all over the U.S. Dory Dixon was very, small, compact, well-built guy. And Ernie, he was paired with him. He destroyed him. And Dory left the territory after holding the tag titles with both Rocky Johnson and Earl Maynard. And then, Ernie's paired with Rocky Johnson, destroys the Soul Man. That was the last Soul Man Rocky Johnson match ever in Los Angeles. And then destroyed Earl Maynard and a part-time wrestler in Dwayne Allen, who was African-American from the LA Rams, who said and told me quite a few times that he made more money the short amount of time he was in pro wrestling than he did like an entire year with the Rams. That's when they weren't getting anything. But that shows you what we were talking about earlier is promoters were, often, if there was like a local guy like Rufus R. Jones in Kansas City when Ernie Ladd came in, they throw him against Rufus Jones, black versus black wrestler, which made no sense to me. But at least finally Ladd showed he was such a killer heel. And at the same time, we had Sheik and Killer Kowalski in our territory. Three, as I say, the three greatest heels for me of that era, 60s, 70s, 80s. And it was so wonderful seeing, Tolis and then Blassie, have hands-on with these guys, and Ladd in particular, who Fred was very fond of, as John Tolis was. And later on, John would team against Gordon and Goliath with Ernie Ladd as an odd babyface pairing who couldn't get along, which you see overused today. So, but
do you guys follow football at all?
Yes.
Now, the most heartwarming thing that really puts Ernie Ladd over, the old NFL films when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl when they beat the Vikings in 1969 or 70, and Ernie Ladd is in the last shot holding Hank Stram up. They all lifted him up on their shoulders, and you definitely see Ernie Ladd. And it's like, that's great. That just gives it legitimacy for both professions. And it's good to see that Ernie Ladd is right there, right in the middle, because, he paid his dues in football as well.
And, he, at different halls of fame and stuff, I don't know if he said that. He probably didn't if he was inducting Bobo, who's just a class. What a great. Those guys had the it factor back then, that aura that they say in Japan, when they would bring these guys in and Bobo would get it in, and, you could tell his knees were bugging him too against Shohei Baba, whose knees also bothered him. But they would get swept up in the whole emotion of it and put on a great match for that particular style, that era. And I don't know. So that throws me into this thing now of the second story. Well, in terms of, I'm talking big league, like TV stuff where fans every so often, it seems like every couple of years, fans will interject themselves and they'll get taken down. Like that guy at the Bret Hart thing.
Yeah.
And if you remember that.
See how quick they were on that, though. Boom. He didn't get too close.
But they had the refs and the agents, and there was some internet talk, the usual, some of these guys that don't know these marks online typing up that, why did Seth, kind of run away and not beat the shit out of the guy? Well, they have actual classes and things for the talent where they're told, how to de-escalate, get away from the guy, let security and, real officials, not the bogus WWE called officials, but the people that are trained for that are waiting in case something happens, they'll take down somebody like that. And anyway, this guy, so it's legit, some people were speculating, maybe this is some kind of big angle. It did look suspicious, weird. The guy came and does a spear on him, but it looked like the guy, the fan, if that was what he was, came from the backstage, but he's still in jail. I guess the bail was like $50,000, and he's going to be hit with minimum two charges next month when he's due back in court. But
well, do you know how it all started?
No,
because it was the end of the match and the promo, and Seth is walking to the back.
No, but what had happened was that someone who said they were Seth Rollins, a fake Seth Rollins, talked to this guy over the internet. And this guy believed that this guy was the fake. Seth Rollins was the fake Seth Rollins was really Seth Rollins. And this guy started scamming this guy for money. And he told him, if you want to get trained, you want to learn about professional wrestling.
This sounds like some defense attorney shit. This sounds bogus, like some bogus excuse.
No, I believe it. I believe it. I think this guy really thought this other dude was Seth Rollins and sent him.
And with Seth Rollins, who's a well-paid wrestler earning seven figures, have to scam some fan for money.
Because people are idiots and they fall for these kind of scams all the time. You're acting like this doesn't happen every day, and it does. As an attorney, I get calls from people wanting attorneys to help them, but usually I can't. Where somebody, sends these gift cards to people, and then they cash the gift cards, and there's no way to trace it. Or they have them wire money.
That's the big scam, is they tell you, this is the IRS, you need to go get gift cards. So to some poor...
why wouldn't people believe that somebody is Seth Rollins? If you would believe the IRS would fall for such a thing, why, would do such a thing, why wouldn't you believe Seth Rollins would? So this guy, was like saying...
It sounds like somebody saying, Madonna's on the phone and she wants money from you. So,
yeah, but some people really believe that, especially, these scammers are well trained to get people to, fork over their money.
Russ, when you're talking about the idea of whether or not you would fight the guy, I think back in the old days when you were on your own as an independent contractor.
Oh, you kicked the shit out of this guy. Oh.
Yeah, but now
Kaniski, they took care of these guys. No, then it was the wrestlers, and that's why a lot of promoters liked having tough guys. And by and large, most wrestlers could handle themselves. Maybe not the performing guys, but the tough guys, the Bull Ramises, Apache Bull Ramis. Fritz von Erich had his share, as did Waldo von Erich. Waldo Sieber had their share of guys. The Sheik, how many times did he kick the shit out of fans that came after him? The Tolis brothers, John and Chris. Let's go to the other story of the week, which was the incredible promo with two guys in their primes. Let me throw out to you, Nikita. I was thinking to myself, well, these people are saying, this is the greatest in 40 years. Well, Kevin Sullivan versus Dusty in Florida. Dusty and
Ric Flair.
or Dusty and the Assassin, Jody Hamilton, two guys facing each other, a mic in each hand, cutting, a promo or having this argument on the mic that really was just artwork promo. Both of you guys, what were some of the best that you might have ever seen? And even if you weren't there, if you watched on TV that happened before?
Spiros Arion gets lost in the mix, but he would cut a very good and quiet promo. He didn't scream and holler, but he would say things like, "May God have mercy on your soul, because I'm not going to have any." Or, "You have to walk over dead bodies to make money." That was big shit back in the 70s. And his face, his expressions, you could feel it. And he was just good at delivering that. Everybody could get out there and do the thing, scream, holler, whatever. But man, when you talk in that very distinct voice and you're looking right at the camera, man, it gives you chills. It's like, shit, I'm glad I'm not Bruno or Chief. I won't want that bastard coming after me. So he was very good. Zabisco's promos against Bruno were
Zabisco,
great.
Bruno, yeah.
Yes. I mean, and it was no bullshit. Not a whole lot of this or that. The realistic aspect sounding like, I couldn't put up with it anymore. I'm tired of being his flunky. And then they just ran on with it. And it was like, it was perfect. And Larry, then he had to do what he had to do. It's like, you ain't going to beat Bruno. So you got to hit and run. You got to stay away from kick him in the balls and then take over. But that's a pro. He did a pro's job. It was perfect.
Yeah, but there's no other person to even mention when you're talking promos without using the name Piper. I mean, that's the guy who took promos to a whole nother level. And
now wait a minute. The master is Lou Albano. That's it. Nobody could beat Lou Albano.
Albano, I was so blessed. That was my young bucket list from about 71 on. I wanted to go to all the territories around the world, including Japan, and shoot everything. But I got chills and got to be very good friends with Captain Lou. And he was so much fun. But man, even the promos before I got there, because John Arisi and other people in the Northeast, from like 71 on, we would tape trade, but it was audio cassettes of the shows. So I had people, from everywhere, because I was, also doing the Tolis Brothers newsletter when I was also doing the last incarnation of Fred Blassie's fan club with John Arisi. And he'd send me the Albano stuff when he was called Looney Lou, well before the Valiants came in and became the captain. He was Looney Lou, the feuds with Strongbow, and man, was he good. But
three-quarters of his promos didn't make any sense. I mean, I loved them, but you couldn't follow anything of what he was saying.
That was later on, the crazy Captain Lou. But what Nikita's talking about is the violent Captain Lou, who doubled as a wrestler. He still was wrestling, because he was part of the Great
Sicilians, yes.
The Altamori.
I never heard any of his promos.
Oh, you got to listen to those pre-73 say.
Hard to find.
And he and Vince hated each other. Yeah. And it would come out in the promos. It really did. Because there's one in particular. It was one of Bruno's last color commentating before he left and gave it to Pat. And Albano's he must have been lit, because he's off the wall. He's throwing shit at Vince, and Vince picked something up and threw it back at him. And Vince is standing there with the microphone, and he looks over at Bruno, and he says, he don't say it, but he mouths the word. It's like he's had it. He's actually had it. I heard that Senior must have fired, or no, Junior fired him about 20 times, and Senior's like, no, we're not firing Lou.
But Roddy Piper made Piper's Pit a you cannot miss moment of wrestling, where it was one of the rare times that a promotional piece was more highly sought after every Saturday night than the actual matches themselves. You always wondered what was going to happen next on Piper's Pit.
I had the blessed thing of seeing him develop, because he was just jobbing. He was floating around, first from Winnipeg to Kansas City to Houston, and then Red Bastien sent him
Portland.
He was supposed to go to San Francisco for Roy Shire in January of 76, but instead he came to our territory. He was just going to do a one shot at our Battle Royal. January 76 was the very first time Piper was in California, in LA. And our booker, who was a genius, he used to be father-son wrestler with his dad, Gino, but Leo Garibaldi, our booker then, got a hold of him and saw something in him. Piper had the bagpipes. He didn't even bring them. He was just a bland babyface having a babyface match with Tony Rocco before the Battle Royal that night. And within a week at the San Diego venue, he, but particularly at Leo's urging, had hammered out turning him into a heel, having him play the bagpipes, having him take forever to get the kilt off and all that stuff, take the T-shirt off, infuriate the fans for 10 minutes before. And so Leo and Gene LaBelle worked with him on promos, and also Charlie Moto a bit, Mr. Moto. And that's where the promo stuff, if you have to go back before the stuff Russ is talking about, because he was magnificent as a talker in Portland, in Mid-Atlantic, and Atlanta, where he was paired and doing one of the first heel color commentaries with Gordon Soley for Georgia Championship, which is out of this world. And I got to watch him, as probably Nikita did, every week. But in LA, and then he was the first guy, along with Lonnie Main, his best friend. They were main eventing in 2 territories at once, which never happened. And these are territories, I mean, every week, not just a one-shot. Lonnie Main and Roddy Piper, the late great Moondog Lonnie Main. And but that's another guy that really finessed him on these promos. And he was going from just generic stuff like barbell plates and T-bone steaks and saying this stuff. If you look at that, and I have the master tapes, there are poor quality of LA 1976, 77 on YouTube. But I have the masters, and they're pristine, but you at least can, even though the footage is all shaky on YouTube, you kind of get an idea what Piper could do. So whereas Nikita told me to go, hopefully I can find it on YouTube, Nikita, the Ernie Ladd inducting Bobo.
Yeah, it should still be. Well, either that or it's on WWE's whatever it's like.
The streamer, which isn't as good as their original WWE network. But
and you know who we can't leave out is the superstar. I mean, man, oh man. I guess you saw him more on the West Coast.
With him, I've had many conversations with him. So Roddy and I got to be great friends. Let me finish that story, because came into our territory. I often had to drive him to either Burbank or LAX airports, where Lonnie Main would drive, and that led to his demise when he was head on driving the 5 freeway up to work for Shire the next day. It was Olympic Auditorium every other Friday, big show, and then Saturday at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, about 400 some odd miles. But like Piper, when he put out 2 books, and he hit me up for photos. So there's a lot of photos that say, have my name on them, and then also from Roddy Piper, courtesy Roddy Piper. But a lot of those he'd forgotten to have credited. I had given him over the decades. But anyway, when he had the first of his first major book on the book press tour, he hired me to introduce him at a number of venues, at Borders and Barnes and Nobles. And I would surprise him. But the very first one in San Francisco, I got the San Francisco Bagpiper Association. So I had like 20 bagpipe players play him in from the elevator to come and do the book signing. What he hired me to do was warm up the crowd, do quiz, talk for a half hour, and then do the interview segment with him. And anyway, but Billy Graham, as did Killer Kowalski, as did Ken Patera, and Ernie Ladd would say, when they first came in and Vince told them, Vince Sr., that they were going to have a manager and it's going to be the Wiz, so they go, well, I can already talk, I can do my own talking. But that was the funny thing with Graham. He's so great. Why does he need a secondary? He doesn't really need a manager, but that was just the way it was then. All the heels had one of those 3 managers, the triad of amazing managers, all great in their own way. Grand Wizard Ernie Roth, Captain Lou, and Fred Blassie, the fashion plate, the Hollywood fashion plate. But Billy Graham, the guy that busted open when they had me on, and there, I think Mark Henry was saying, "Oh, Billy Graham got that from preachers that he'd watch on TV." No, he got it from Dr. Jerry Graham, taught him, discovered him at a bodybuilding place in Phoenix, and then brought him to LA, and Billy Graham was teaming with him, and Jerry was trying to show him the ropes. He was green as grass. He had some verbal skills, and then Jerry sent him to Stu Hart, and then Stu sent him to Roy Shire, who really worked with him. Pat and Ray Stevens worked, and Shire, all amazing guys, both in the talking and the wrestling department, worked with Billy Graham, and he was then coming out in just leather fringe as the American, the soul of America, or something like that. And the first time he debuted the tie-dye was when he came back to LA after having the jet black hair. He comes back with the bleach blonde hair from San Francisco and the tie-dye, and he's now superstar Billy Graham. And man, could he talk cutting promos against Blassie, Tolis, oh God, all of our top baby faces. Chris Tolis was there teaming with John, if you got that. And
but you would agree with me, Nikita, that everybody needs a manager, right?
Yes.
Wow. Everyone can use a good manager.
But the good thing about it was, though, he and Ernie worked well together, and Graham would let him go with it. He'd say, "Go ahead, Wiz, tell him," and then the Wiz would do his bit, back off, and let Superstar finish the interview, because you gotta let Superstar do his thing. And as a champion, especially, that was just perfect. I said it in my book. My favorite time was Superstar as champion of the 70s. We loved it.
And you know the funny thing, and we had him on the show. I brought him on the show with Evan and I on Legends a couple of times, and he said, you know, he kept going to Vince Sr. and saying, "I've got this idea about selling T-shirts," and you know, he knew he was just a transition champion. It was only going to be champion. Actually, it wasn't even supposed to be that long before the drop to Backlund, who Sam Muchnick had recommended to Vince Sr. But he said he wanted a babyface run as champion because he was getting cheered. The fans could see how great he was, particularly as a talker and a heat getter. You know, he wasn't the greatest wrestler, but he had those other skills that kind of made you overlook the fact that, you know, he wasn't a Bruno or a Tony Garea even, or Larry Zbyszko.
But most people said he was Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan was Hulk Hogan.
Well, yeah, and Hogan and Jesse Ventura and some others, like even Sergeant Slaughter. One of his characters was a ripoff of Superstar Graham.
Beautiful Bobby. Yeah.
Beautiful Bob. Had long hair, was doing that sort of a surfer thing. But Billy Graham begged Vince Sr. to let him turn face and be a face champion. He thought he would sell a ton of merch, and Vince just was not comfortable with with him in that role, which was a shame.
One of the great what ifs of the world.
But they also, I heard it said many times, Vince Sr. said, "I don't do that. I don't sell merchandise. It's not what my business is. I do wrestling." And they missed the boat on that for sure, not just with Superstar, but in so many ways.
Yeah,
well, of course, Junior understood it. He made billions on it, so yeah.
Yeah, Vince made up for it back the other way, and now he sells everything but wrestling, as you pointed out. And wrestling just happens to be a side business, and being, selling stock is his number one thing. Sure. So,
hey, Freddie Blassie, don't forget Freddie is a great talker.
Sure, let everybody know Evan is just off tonight and our next taping next week for this. I
fired him. He's gone.
Exactly. Yeah, we sold him out.
I want to make sure you'll be with us.
He's in jail
too, if that's okay.
Yes,
so, hard time. He's just a hard time.
And then I'm going to be gone the 2 weeks after. So Evan's gone next show, and then I'll be gone just 2 shows after that. But let me ask. So we're talking about this. How about managers? Maybe not the Tri-WF. We've talked about how great they were. And now Ernie Roth, a lot of people forget that he was first Mr. Clean, managing Magnificent Maurice and Handsome Johnny Behrens, who were part of the Buddy Rogers legit camp. They were the clique before there was a clique. And Cowboy Billy Darnell was part of that, as well as a guy known as Booby. And when I had him in my TV studio together, Johnny Valentine and Buddy Rogers, Buddy said that's his pet name for his best friend, Johnny Valentine, was Booby, because he had no fear. I guess he would go up and squeeze the girls, a rat or a promoter's wife, he'd just go up and squeeze their boobs. So Booby. But so we have Ernie Roth. Then I think he had some other, Jay Wellington, Radkins. He had some other characters, but his best, I thought, wasn't the Grand Wiz, but was managing the Sheik as Abdullah Farouk, the original Weasel. So good, particularly in the Midwest, obviously Detroit's Cobo and Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens before Eddie Creechman took him over. But let's talk about some of these other legendary managers and their verbal skills. Eddie Creechman, who could speak Hebrew and Yiddish and French because he was in Montreal for the Rougeau promotion, and of course English. He's kind of underrated as a talker. I don't know if you saw much of him, or Tony Angelo was the first one of the first Vince senior managers after Bobby Davis managing Buddy Rogers, before Captain Lou switched from wrestler to manager. And Tony Angelo in the Tri-WF managed the Mongols and a couple other teams.
And Koloff. Yeah, because the big thing was Lou bought the contract. Well, Nikolai told me what happened. He was Canadian, Angelo, and he was having trouble. And it was like, okay, he had to walk away from the business. Nothing that anybody screwed him or anything. It's just family issues. He had to walk away. So it was like, all right, let's do this. Lou Albano's going to buy the contracts. And
was Tony any good at cutting promos? I never got to see tape of him or hear him, though.
I don't know. I'll tell you, I never, because that was like my very beginning in 1970, and I was only like 11, so I don't remember too much about it. I didn't see a whole lot of him. But Nikolai said he was a great guy. He helped him along because, of course, Newton brought him, and then it was like, well, then Angelo's the manager, so he was very involved with things for a time until Lou took over. And Nikolai said, well, Lou, of course, was great, with not being just on camera, but behind the scenes. It's like he treated me like a son. He took good care of me. No, don't do this. Don't let him do that to you. Lou showed him a little bit of the ropes too.
What did the Nikolai say about Blassie? Because they seemed very tight. That was his first manager in that particular character when he stopped being a Mongol, the third Mongol, and he's now Bruno wins the championship. I remember this totally. December 10th, 1973 at the Garden from Stasiak. The very first guy he's going to face in defending the title, first at Madison Square, and then we shot him at Nassau Coliseum in New York, was Nikolai Volkov, who was huge as a heel. Huge.
See, we never put the two together for a long time, that he was a Mongol, because he just comes in, he looks like Nikolai, this big guy, this Russian guy. And it wasn't the Soviet Russian Russ. It was just, he came in he wore black throughout the 70s, black boots, black trunks. He had animal furs when he was a Mongol, but he didn't do any of the red stuff until the cartoons of '84 with Hogan. But you knew he was a Russian, usually said from Siberia. But yeah, he loved Freddie. They got along great. In fact, Freddie got hit in the eye in Boston. That's what cut his cornea. And Nikolai was in the ring with him at the time. No singing or anything like that, just introduced before the match. And then that's when they started to put up that big screen in Boston after that happened. So when people started to throw items into the ring, the screen usually would intercept it. But yeah, Freddie got hit in the eye, cut his cornea, and he never did have good vision after that. But Nikolai loved him till the end. They were very close and always spoke highly.
Well, they did a tour of Japan for Inoki when Blassie and the Tri-WF cut ties with Baba because they would send their guys, and Bruno and Morales both went in and did tours as champion for Vince, but in all Japan for Baba. And then around 70, it was 70, well, no, it was January, it was 74, maybe around April, when Blassie and Nikolai did a tour with some other WWF guys. Monsoon, too, was on that tour for Inoki. And that was really historic to pull allegiance from Baba to Inoki. And that's when Vince Sr. got close with Shinma Sr., who he put as his fictitious Tri-WF president, really when everything was Vince and his group of Phil Zacco was, I think, one of and Monsoon, and Arnie Skoland, etc. And Savoldi in that office. Yeah, Savoldi. But so that was kind of cool. They did not a mixed tag, but Blassie teamed with Nikolai. And did they team, to your knowledge, in the Tri-WF in any matches? They must.
Against Bruno and Chief. It was June 24th of 74. But they had a warm-up the Saturday before in Baltimore against Tony Garea and Dean Ho. So that was Freddie's last match in the WWF, that tag match, WWF, him and Nikolai. And he had to trust Nikolai to get in there because he was, again, with the knees and everything else, all the other injuries.
He stopped taking bumps after his historic feud with John Tolis. No more bumps. He just, other than his Southern neckbreaker, his finisher, he would not even get down to his knees in the ring, because he was in his 50s by then.
Yeah.
But he had that aura. Fred had that aura when he was a babyface. I can't tell you that's kind of at least how I'll end it, and I'll ask you guys to finish up because I'm going to have to go in a few minutes. Blassie and Tolis were cutting state-of-the-art promos against each other, and both had a mic, and they were doing all kinds of stuff. They had the very first Snake way before Jake Roberts. We're talking 1971, the Snake in the mystery box that Tolis brought out as the killer heel against the ultimate babyface and Fred Blassie. And I know people don't even know, the Sheik helped turn Fred Blassie face initially. They had 3 cage matches on every other Friday. So 6 weeks, 3 cage matches in the Blassie cage, where Blassie finally came out victorious. The last one had our Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard, Abdullah Farouk, in the little weasel box, it was the cage above the ring. So the manager in there, so he couldn't help the Sheik win. And then, because Fred had been the ultimate heel in LA for over 10 years, well over 10 years, he challenges Rocky Johnson. He says, look, I want to wrestle a clean, scientific match. That's what we call babyface matches then, with you. Hour time limit, and if I use an underhanded hold or whatever he said, if I cheat or whatever, I'll leave town. And so they had a scientific match. So Sheik started it, and then Rocky Soulman Johnson finished, helping turn Fred Blassie face. And so when they had that wonderful angle, the doctor's cut powder that Tolis threw in Blassie's eyes when he was accepting an award from the fans on KCOP Channel 13 TV around February 1971. And they strung that out, showing footage of Fred in the hospital bed, blinded. So Fred already had an eye injury. It wasn't from the powder thrown in his eye by Tolis. And then you said it got worse, and a couple of years later in '74, tag match with Nikolai, or whatever happened with Nikolai. But they strung it out until August to the LA Outdoor Coliseum show, which outgrossed anything to that point. Actually, I think it still holds the record for gross in terms of dollars. They were hoping it would draw bigger, but it drew basically like what Shea Stadium, Bruno Pedro drew, about a little over 29,000 fans. And on top was, the greatest feud with the greatest talkers at that time, Tolis Blassie on top. Then the longest feud for that era, actually from late 50s to 70s, Bobo Brazil against the Sheik underneath that. Battle Steel tag teams, Gordon McGlythe against Kenji Shibuya and Masa Saito, the Mr. Saito, Masa Saito. Mil Mascaras against his arch rival in Mexico, the original absolute best, one of the greatest wrestlers on the planet ever, the late El Solitario. On and on. Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson were in the opener on this Outdoor Coliseum show, which was Moolah in a shoot with Betty Nikolai, California champion Betty Nikolai, who had legit heat with Lily and Moolah, who was the world champion. And that match was out of this world. It might have been the match of the night, other than Tolis Blassie. So, but the promos that Tolis and Blassie were cutting then were state of the art, much like what we're seeing here with CM Punk, with Eddie Kingston, or CM Punk against MJF. So it's wonderful to see that brought back, and it was not scripted. They let those guys just go out and do it.
That's the thing that we wouldn't see with the WWE right now. Having an unscripted promo is so against the WWE's religion. They probably somewhere, Vince is like watching that and like going, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. People are not scripted here, and we don't have something that was made by, a former child cartoon writer. This is, this isn't something from somebody that used to work on Days of Our Lives.
I urge you guys did not see MJF last Friday night on AEW Dynamite. It's right on YouTube. It goes over 20 minutes. It is state-of-the-art talking. No memorization, nothing. They just told those guys to go out there, wing it, which is the best.
I mean, whatever happened to those days where somebody could do that, where
he was one of the few given that prestige thing by Vince to not.
I can tell you, Dusty Rhodes, when he did his hard time script, when he did his hard time speech,
pretty damn good.
No one had to write that for him. That was something that came right. Nikita, you familiar with that one where he, yeah, I mean, that's when I consider like legendary speeches, like with the Gettysburg Address, I consider that hard time speech one of those great speeches.
Well, his son, Cody Rhodes, just last year, I think February 2020, cut his version of that, and it was very good. It wasn't as good. Nothing could ever top.
Nothing could ever be that good. There
It was
something.
his tribute. It was his tribute to his dad, also unscripted. Most of the stuff. Tony Khan is so smart. He knows that's what people are craving. They don't want to hear this WWF stuff where they go, "Come Sunday," you know that's all effing scripted. I urge you guys to watch that. I urge you guys to watch anything that Eddie Kingston does there. His promos and MJF's, they don't miss a beat. They don't say or hmm. They don't stop for a second. They are on point. It is magnificent to see. So I know I was nagging Nikita to try to watch all these shows. I was telling him, at the very least, watch the A&E stuff on Wednesday.
Or binge Heels. You know, find a way to watch the show Heels. I finally watched episodes 7 and 8, and so my brother and I are caught up on that. But that's a whole a Stars show.
On the promos. No, it's not. It's not like what these guys are doing in AEW. And those guys on that show, Heels, are friends with everybody from Cody to, they gave a couple of bit parts to CM Punk, who's on at least 3 episodes, as is the big guy in the Impact, the tag champions, the Good Brothers, whatever his name is, the big LG, Luke Gallows. He also had an appearance on there. So, but I urge you guys, watch AEW Dynamite Wednesdays on TNT. I'm not getting anything for saying this. And Fridays, AEW Rampage, only an hour. This is where the thing last Friday was with MJF and CM Punk. And yeah, if you want to throw in NXT, WWE's NXT Tuesday night, some good stuff. Tommaso Ciampa's probably one of the most believable guys in all of WWE, but he's on their Farm System brand, which is crazy. As is Johnny Gargano. Fantastic promo at WWC NXT, which Triple H, I don't know if he's even still running it, but, you know, their promos don't sound scripted there. That's, you know, besides, I just can't watch the other products from WWE. But I got to go, guys. Family stuff. I'll let you guys finish up. So, Kombate Kurosai, everybody. Hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, Dr. Mike, you the man.
So it's just us two here for the next couple minutes. If you
can still hear you,
let me remove you from the call. There we go. So now it's just us two. Yeah, I was gonna before Mike went on his tangent there, I was gonna talk about the manager that influenced me the most. Who is the manager? What for you? What, because you got into the business before I did. What was your role model for managing? Who did you see that told you and taught you how to become the manager you were?
2 people, Lou Albano and Fred Blassie. And then I did get to know them and learn from them over the years. And it's not like they sat down and schooled me, but it's just, you sit and talk with them and listen. And it's like, wow, you can feel it coming out of them. And they were natural, you know, like Mike was saying, with Freddie being a face, we couldn't comprehend that on the East Coast because he was so hated. We never seen Fred Blassie in a face mode at any point in time. So it's like, what? But then again, we didn't really have cable unless you were in New York. Baltimore didn't pick it up, Philadelphia. So it was like Freddie Blassie, the heel. But he would say, besides Pencil Neck Geek, and I punched my own mother in the nose to win the belt. And it's like, okay, I get that. You can relate to something like that. Here's a guy that will do anything to win. And now I'm taking my guys and I'm teaching them the same thing. Even though they got the talent and ability, I'm teaching them. Any Pencil Neck Geek can break the rules, but you got to break the rules and not get caught. And that made sense. That was good. And of course, Lou, with he still had the physicality to get in there. And so Lou would take the beating and he would blade, just like you need Lou to go in there and blade. He don't sit there and just give a couple of cuts. It's like whoosh, 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 whoosh. He would carve himself up. It was a work of art, really, because one night in Baltimore, he wrestled Bruno, and you could give the rest of the company off and have a sellout. And Bruno, of course, blooded him. And my friend and I, we go down to the ring, and it's like, look at this. I mean, it's covered all over the place, all the way down to the aisle, going to the dressing room, and it's like, wow, that's unreal. And Lou, he was a pro. He would do it. But then, Russ, you see him over the years after he left wrestling, and he did that Super Mario Brothers gimmick. It was great. He came down. He was like somebody's uncle. He was a smart man. He knew how to play. You give him a role, even when he turned face with Cyndi Lauper. He sold that well, and people loved him. And it was like, I don't like that bullshit. I like Lou Albano was the crazy maniac. Like they say, he was homicidal and suicidal. You didn't know what he was going to do next. That's the Lou Albano.
Psychedelic pandemonium is what he used to call that. His when he was in his craziest mode, he would call it psychedelic pandemonium. And the guiding light.
And he got the name Captain from Jimmy Valiant when the Valiant brothers were running wild. Jimmy Valiant dubbed him the Captain, and it stuck. From that point on.
Absolutely. The guy that was most influential to me, or big influence, was Andy Kaufman.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that he generated heel heat in a way that, to me, was remarkable, especially because he really knew his audience. He really put the research into where he was going to be and what was going to upset the mass number of fans. He already knew it from his stand-up comedy stuff and when he did his Tony Clifton. And he applied that to the wrestling audience. And I still think he's one of the great managers of all time, even though he didn't manage a lot of wrestlers or have all these championships. I think the impact of what he did and bringing wrestling to the common person through everything he did with Jerry Lawler and the David Letterman stuff was high art for managerial work. And where a manager could get a spotlight, you really don't see that. And you probably wouldn't see that now. Maybe Paul Heyman is the closest you would get to it. But we all know that Paul Heyman now wouldn't get beaten up in any of the stuff that he is involved in. Whereas, Andy Kaufman didn't mind taking the bumps that looks real, the pile driver and the suplexes and the other things that you don't normally see a lot of managers trying to take. So that was one of the things that influenced me, maybe for better or for worse, because I was a very physical manager. I really got bumped pretty hard while I was doing my managerial stuff. Maybe if I had it over again, I would have rather been like the Wizard. The Wizard to me was the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he was the first manager that was totally unphysically imposing on any other wrestlers and wasn't an ex-wrestler, wasn't an ex-athlete of any type, and nobody ever thought he could. And he really didn't get physically involved in many of the matches.
No, he never touched anybody.
No.
And that became a gimmick within itself that nobody ever laid a hand on him either, even though he wasn't physical with his opponents, with his men's opponents. Still, he would do devious things, hand them objects and distract referees. So you still wanted to kill him, but nobody ever got their hands on him. So that became a gimmick within itself.
Yeah.
Who's going to get a hold of the Wizard,
And that's just something that's totally lost in today's wrestling. I mean, it's not even something that we would even see as an angle or as a concept. And I don't know. It'd be fun if wrestling decided to do at least with one manager that kind of a retro feel to it. But maybe just in the day of kayfabe, we're just gone. That just thing is gone.
No, I think they could still. What's old is new again, right? And this could definitely be, or maybe AEW can revive this.
It's AEW. You can give me a call anytime now. I'm ready to come back. Except exactly. I can't bump. I wish I could, but I'm sure some young entrepreneurial type somewhere wants to, go back to being a bumping rep. I mean, we kind of had it with Rockstar Spud for a little bit, but then the guy who was the little short guy, they had him managing for a little bit, and they kind of made him bump a little bit, but they didn't commit to it, and that's obviously what the WWE's got its biggest problem is to commit to a story angle for anything longer than a month or two, and just like we said, what we were saying before, Survivor Series came and went, and did it have any impact on your life whatsoever as a wrestling fan?
I don't even know anything about it, my friend.
I don't either. I don't know what happened. I don't know what the results were. And by next week, probably everything that was important in that match has probably been undone, or they've had a rematch on it since then. And that's kind of the fate of the pay-per-view right now, which is that you just have so much wrestling now, and they need so much filler that they'll show what they just showed in the pay-per-view.
Well, see, there you go. That's a good point. Wrestling is a lot like the news. It's too much overdone. Then you got to reach to fill time. Whereas before, you had too many people. You couldn't get them in that hour. What the hell did an hour break down to? 47 minutes when you put the promos and the commercials in. So it's like, man, you got to keep the matches short. You're not going to get everybody on. And it's like today, it's too long. What's it, Raw? 3 hours or 2?
3 hours, and with something like the Survivor Series, they have like an hour pre-show, and it's a 3-hour, 4-hour event or something like that. And WrestleMania is like 17 hours because they do it over 2 days now, and soon it's going to be a gift-giving holiday. You're gonna have your WrestleMania tree, and you're gonna give WrestleMania presents and sing WrestleMania carols, the night before. I'll have to explain to my kids. There was a time before WrestleMania, and WrestleMania wasn't even a word, and
it was every Monday night in Madison Square Garden. Every month in Madison Square Garden, it was WrestleMania, because the cards that were put on, the performances that were done, those were WrestleMania, my friend.
And all the TV stuff built up to that. All the TV stuff built up to the house shows that you wanted to see, live and in person. And now there's no build up to see anything except these large pay-per-views, but they wind up being so numerous in nature that they don't really, I don't know why people are paying. Anyone that paid $800 to see Survivor Series is really beyond hope. And then Evan was saying that people are paying $1,000 to see a Raw taping in New York City. And it's become less of a let's go and watch what's happening to I went and saw a WWE match. That's what people are turning it into, is that the going to the match itself is the event, not who actually is wrestling is the event. I mean, that's really sad.
We love wrestling, without
a doubt.
But I would never put that kind of money. And I'm not rich, and there's no way. Maybe if I was rich and I had money to spare, but I could never do anything like that. Even to see Chief against Ken Patera or Spirit, no, you're not going to get $800 out of me. Forget about it.
And you would think that I would be raising my kids to love wrestling like I would, and that we'd all watch it together, but I don't. It's really not. My kids really don't care much about it, and I couldn't sell it to the next generation, so it's going to basically die with me after I'm all said and done with it. It's not going to be carried on by my kids.
And so that's volumes. For as much passion as you have for it from the past, and you won't pass it on, that speaks volumes right there.
It does. I don't feel it's so quality. I want my kids wasting the kind of time that I'm wasting now watching this stuff, because it's just so awful, and there's other stuff I'd rather have them watch, and they don't have the interest in it. The mindless, senseless, storyless kind of stuff. It's hard for me to tell them, get excited about this, because it's going to be really, because they can tell I don't care as much about it now. And so they don't see it in me. They see a lot, me caring more about the 49ers and about the Giants and about the Warriors, but not so much about, Roman Reigns or John Moxley or
it's
whatever.
Like people that binge watch a series just to catch up so they can join in conversations and know what's going on. You're not really feeling it. I mean, you're just basically like what used to be the old fast forward. It's like, no. You're not enjoying something like that. Sit back, relax, let it. Nikolai used to say it to me all the time. If you make it too long, people are going to lose interest. And I've found that to be true, without a doubt. Shows like what we're doing, if it goes way over an hour, you lose people. They're just not.
Uh-oh. Well, we have gone way over an hour, so we'll have to wrap it up for this week. But we can continue this discussion because you'll be on the show next week.
I'm there next week, my brother.
Well, appreciate it so much. Thank you so much, and happy Hanukkah to everybody else that's out there listening. Have a great night. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.